try and find it. I don't know. Did anyone have had a chance to look at that? Because I know I think we shared it on a couple of things.
That's a question for everybody. Can anybody? Do you know what we're talking about?
I'm not sure because I don't recognise the content. I'll have a quick look in my folders.
No, let me try and find it myself. It was basically Jarek had kind of created this sort of I don't know, this sort of workflow diagram, which kind of enables someone to check whether their project needs to, let's say, go through the gateways or not. And it was trying to generate a one-page sort of crib sheet or worksheet, which to me is quite a useful thing, rather than having to necessarily read lots of different documents. But obviously we want to make sure that the facts are correct in it and the workflow, because they keep obviously changing. Just don't know where I've got that though.
Jess, have you got access to it?
Let me have a look.
Apologies for this. Okay, I think I've got it.
So there's two documents that the design group, Jarek, by the way, we talk about Jarek. Jarek Whittick is an electrical engineer, project manager, and he's done a really good job in mapping out the various different elements that responsibilities and the like. So he's put this on a Miro board, and what we're hoping is that people can look at it and derive from it, but also add to it and improve it. So
here we go, got it. So this is what Jarek has done, and I don't know how many people have used this sort of Miro board. I'm sure some of you have, or something similar. But what he did was to generate this workflow diagram, and then we've sort of, a couple of us have sort of commented on it, and the idea being that it should be a fairly straightforward, easy thing to navigate around in terms of yes, no, go to this step, do that, etc. So simply, what is the category, for example? Does it fall into one of these? If it's not, then obviously the process ends, for example. So on the back of this, I've sort of made some comments about, using the government diagrams for measuring the building height, for example. So these are diagrams that I was received by another party, but I know the government documents also have their diagrams, which take into account the nuances about measuring a floor that might be just sticking up above the ground level. So I've sort of added some comments. I think another gentleman has added comments into here as well. But the thinking is that by following these, parts, I guess, people can understand, and then if they need to, in terms of Gateway 1, this is what needs to be done. These are, for example, the planning advice portal for Gateway 1, or if you're going through Gateway 2, we've tried to put in what we currently understand as being the costs or the rates, and then obviously we work our way through Gateway 2, Gateway 3, etc. So that's essentially the workflow diagram that is created, but obviously it will be useful to make sure that the particular triggers or the, for example, pay 251, maybe that figure has changed now. And it's just making sure that we're trying to capture the most up-to-date information and knowledge in this. Jarek, I think it is a similar thing for, I think, a different sort of exercise, but he managed to get it all onto sort of like a, I guess, an A3 piece of paper or something. And that's the aim of this. So I can share the link again, and we can ask Jarek to kind of share it again. But that's one thing that we wanted to kind of share across the community and make sure everyone's aligned to or is happy with it. So that would be one tangible output from the thing. Ben, you got your hand up, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it is 251 as of a couple of days ago anyway still. But I've, funnily enough, been doing a similar sort of exercise internally on the same project, on the same topic, but from a slightly different angle. But something that we've been debating internally and we haven't been able to agree on is, so say you've got, you know, for a new build, whether it's you know, an HRB or not, it's fairly clear what the process is. But what we have is and a lot of developers will have this too, is you have an HRB, and then you have say a retail unit at the on the ground floor, and it's a separate compartment. You can only access it from outside, so therefore it's a separate building as is defined in the guidance. But there is some so therefore, you know, imagine you were going to do a Cat B fit out of that retail unit, you know, it wouldn't be a Gateway 2 application because it's only a retail space. It doesn't meet the threshold of being an HRB. However, we have quite a few sort of nuances to that. If you want to, you know, make some changes to the compartmentation or introduce some ductwork, say, that goes through the HRB, does it then qualify and make it a Gateway 2 application? And that's something that I think would be is going to be applicable to a lot of people. And there's definitely a sort of 50-50 in terms of two camps. And I've even got two London boroughs at the moment with completely opposing opinions on this. So it'd be really good to tease that out as well.
Well, I think make a really good point about these sort of nuances in terms of compartment building, etc. And I think I know there's a session on Friday that George and the team have sort of called about asking for people who've submitted, or has anyone's experience of people who've submitted for applications. I think I listened to a couple of HSC webinars from the kind of the senior people, there's a gentleman called Andy and someone else, George will remember, but they seem to be saying in their webinars, so they're open for people to submit almost scenarios or they're open to people discussing the process that people need to go through. Obviously not the answer to the question that they've raised, but what you're talking about is a question about the process and the relevancy of it. And we've got a similar thing where we're looking for a local authority, and they've got a high risk building, but they can only do the works in bits depending on when maybe tenants become vacant or the property becomes vacant, or if it's a leaseholder, it's up to sort of them. So you kind of end up with this sort of patchwork quilt, let's say, of works to a facade, albeit it may be the internal lining because of a listed building. But how do you go about doing that? Do you have to put an application in every single time, wait 12 weeks or whatever for every single flat that comes up? Or what we're talking about is maybe talking to them about getting some sort of design approval guide, which if followed to the T, will they be happy to kind of sign it off for the whole building, for example, or the different scenarios? So I don't know the answer to your question necessarily. I know in the guidance that I saw in the government guidance, they had a number of different diagrams about the similar kind of things that you're talking about, where you had a couple of blocks fixed at the ground floor or car parks and links and stuff. I don't know if you've seen that and whether that helped or didn't help, but
yeah, I mean, I think that guidance, you know, it's one of the guidance notes actually really good and really clear. It's more the nuances within that, you know, taking that guidance as read, you know, there's not really any dispute about any of that. It's more about, you know, what's not there. You know, does fitting out a commercial unit and connecting to the fire alarm of the HRB then make it, you know, higher risk work? Personally, personally, in my view, if you're not changing the principles that were established within the information submitted as part of the HRB application, then I don't think it is. But, you know, if you were to introduce some ductwork or a new entrance, then it that affects the HRB, then it would be. But I can see this, and this is a real problem for, you know, you take up, say, a Pret a Manger is one of the ones which we've got, just not picking on Pret a Manger, but everyone can everyone can visualize what that is. So, you know, they're going into a tall building, and then a fit out company is, you know, they're used to doing shop fitting, but you know, and then you say to them, oh, you need to do a Gateway 2 application. They say, we don't know what that is. We're not, we're going to go somewhere else. Is basically what's happening at the moment.
I mean, my like I said, I think if you're available, I think that session may be quite useful on Friday, because other people might have already done it. But again, listening to the webinar from the HSE, I think they said that they had no applications yet. Basically, because everyone's trying to either do things quickly before the April deadline, or are just waiting to get some more guidance in terms of, I don't know, staircase, or they're redesigning, or whatever it may be. So
well, I did one on Monday,
cool.
So it may well be one of the first.
Yeah, that's sort of what they were saying.
Mo's got his hand up at the moment. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Mo. Hi, Mo.
So I'm camera, but it hasn't been working. Yeah, no, you're just going to get the background. I don't know what's going on with it. You don't need to look at that.
Invisible man.
That's it. I've just put a link in the chat, actually. So you've got the contacting the building safety regulator, and that's a portal question system that you can ask any question. I've used it on a number of occasions. I haven't got answers back on all of them, but some of them I have, and it's quite useful. But just to be wary, once you submit the question, you get an email back saying thank you for the question, but it doesn't let you know what your question was. So you have to take a screenshot before you go to. But it is useful that they've come back with a couple of queries that we've had on process, and it's ironed it out. So I would encourage people to use it. It's there to be used. And coming back to the diagrams that we spoke about, I did find them useful because there's two sets of diagrams, one for design and construction phase and one for occupation phase. So you have to be careful which set you're looking at, because the occupational are very different to the design, because it's to do with handover. So you can actually be designing a building that is an HRB, but then is considered an independent building at a later stage that doesn't need to be registered as an HRB. So it's very confusing, but I just focus on the design and construction diagram now. If we get any questions from clients whether or not they need to register it, then we direct them to the other. But the example that's been given with a shop, my understanding was, you know, any building work that requires a building application to an HRB has to then be submitted to the BSR, you know, and follow that procedure. So I'm not too sure if and that would be particularly if it's at the stage of construction. It's all at the same stage. You're not talking about a fit out after the building has been handed over, if you see what I mean.
Does that help you, Ben?
Honestly, most of these, it tends to be after, you know, well after the building's all done and handed over. And usually these are buildings, HRBs, that were constructed under the old regime. And then, you know, they've lain empty for a while. And, you know, as in accordance with that guidance note that you're referring to, they're deemed a separate building. And, you know, a fit out contractor is coming along to try and do some work in there. So I think that's a good idea. Is maybe we submit that scenario onto the portal and see what they come back with.
Yeah, that'd be first point of call, I reckon, is your best bet. See, yeah, see what they come back with. But it's without digressing the scenario that you've explained, I think that needs to be part of the construction control plan. So if you're saying this isn't being fitted out, you have to put it to the BSR what's been put in place, if you like, to manage that. So if a client says we don't know what the unit's going to be used for, and like all of a sudden you've got mechanical ventilation for a CAF going in or something like that, it's how does that then significantly affect the safety, the rest of the building? Has it been considered? Compartmentation, structure, all of the above, if you see what I mean. But the interesting thing on that is who is the principal designer for building regs, because if the principal designer is responsible for the whole building, who is then responsible for the later works, if you see what I mean, how is that dealt with? But what you've described could also form potentially a staged application, which is that's very muddied what a stage application is, in my view. But you could look at it that way, that everything above is the main application, and the stage application is then the works that follow on.
Thanks very much.
Guys, you're on mute.
Sorry. Mo, I just asked whether it's possible if you do. So I think I've seen one of the sets of diagrams, or maybe not the other set of diagrams that you referred to. If you're able to kind of share the links, so that'd be useful as well, just for me and everyone, I guess.
I'll chuck them both in this chat now. Yeah,
that'd be fantastic. So yeah, I think like I said, that session on Friday, George, I don't know how many people you think may have already been involved or had applications done, but I think that might be a good place to start in terms of the sort of scenario. And what we're personally trying to do with that local authority is to see, I'm at the moment just trying to check that I've got the question that they want to ask and the process they want to follow correct. So I've just sort of sent a draft to them to then share with the regulator to see what their response are, because they've got, I think they're meant to be able to help us, and they need to help different parties understand the scenarios. Then how we obviously address the requirements is a different matter as to a certain degree.
Should we just explain what Friday is?
Please,
so
George.
This basically, it came out of a LinkedIn post about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where somebody was posting about the experience that they were having in terms of submitting for a gateway submission, or making a gateway submission, and through building control, and then how building control was dealing with it. And so what it seemed to be very pertinent to what we were doing. So what we've done is set up a workshop on a Teams workshop on Friday, which you're welcome to join. I mean, we've had a really strong response to it. I think we've got 80 or 90 people already signed up to it. That will probably change. I mean, in my experience, that will probably drop to 40, but it's still a very high contact, and we've got a lot of clients coming onto that to really also, I think, understand. So, and we've got a couple of building control specialists on it as well. So that might be something that you'd find useful. And I think everybody's learning at the moment, and this type of collaborative way of doing it, I think, is critical. Richard.
Sorry, Jess, do you want to put a meeting link in the chat?
Yeah.
And then if anybody wants to come along, they can copy the link, and then you can just join the meeting. It's 9:30 on Friday morning for an hour and a half. Sorry.
No, that's great. Daz, do you want to also cover your as well as the? I think there's some new people have joined, so my suggestion would be, do you want to show the cheat sheet, or the document that you've been working up, the reference document that you've been working up, or that we've been working up? You've had a number of people input to that, and then we might flip back and just show the Miro board again for people that weren't on when we showed it a few minutes ago.
What I'll
Okay.
do while we're on it, I'll just try and send the link to the Miro board. 'Cause like I said, it's one of those things where you can, I think, either log in through just sometimes you don't even need to log in. But let me just find that. So I'll share it, see whether you can get into it on the call.
Anna, you're very process driven. Have you seen what we're talking about here? Are you aware of what we're talking about with the Miro board?
No. Hi everyone. Sorry, I joined a tiny bit late. I'm not part of your Miro board.
No, you're welcome
but
to
I know,
contribute
yeah,
to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course.
It was one that Jarek set up. Like I said, I just shared the link that he shared with me, but
Okay.
I think you can join in as a guest to kind of add comments and stuff. But what I'll do is after this call, I'll resend it, and I guess Jason, Richard, if you kind of send me the link, the names of all the team members here, then we can just make sure everyone gets it. And then Jarek, if there are any queries, Jarek can help answer it. But what Jarek had done was, I'll just share the gain on my screen. So just for your viewing. So what he had done was this, which was just to create the little workflow diagram to essentially someone to be able to follow the yes, the no, to see whether it needs to be registered or whether it applies. We've tried to and put in some guidance diagrams, which these are not the government ones, so we need to replace them with the government ones, or a link to them, I guess, so that people can evaluate whether their building is falls into the category or not. Anyway, then he's kind of put in information to do with the gateways, and there are various links that I had suggested that you can go through to get advice for the kind of gateway one planning applications and things like that, or the kind of advice from them. So that's what essentially Jared had done, but we're just obviously trying to make sure that it's as sort of simple as possible, but obviously captures the key key kind of gates that you have to go through, or checks. So any other input, and I guess it's kind of evolving because the information or the guidance is kind of evolving. But what Jarek aimed to do was to create basically like an A3 or an A4 one page, almost like a a PDF version of this that people can share and use. And I guess that could be audited and checked with any other information that might come through, so like a version control of it. So that's basically what Jarek was looking at. And I don't know whether the link I sent you works or whether you had to sign in to be able to comment on it, but you can add comments, and then, like I said,
it works.
does it work? Okay, brilliant. So that's yeah, I guess that's something that would be really useful, I think, because I think for most people, a little flow diagram is quite an easy way to kind of assimilate or kind of get through all the regulations in an easy manner. The other thing that George alluding to is these sort of little crib sheets, these sort of 4 or 5 pages that I think I might have shared before, but what I tried to do here was, this is sort of part of something I was also presenting just internally, is just to make a crib sheet, which I would like some input on to kind of make sure I've got the facts right, so that we can then format this into the standard sort of BIM4Housing format, and again share with the wider community, and again kind of keeping a version control, I guess. But I won't go through this line by line, but it's, as far as I understand, I've tried to simulate the key components of the various acts that have come in. I've tried to condense. The yellow are things that new things that I've kind of added, having listened to, for example, that HSE webinar, for example. But you know, the information that I'm well aware of in terms of Gateway 1, again, that link to sort of where you're meant to be able to get advice for, the current sort of timelines that I'm aware of in terms of, let's say, approvals or processing, the major changes, the notifiable changes, etc. And then in terms of looking at things which are to do with, say, maybe works to existing high risk buildings. So if you're doing sort of refurbishments to facades, etc., this is going to become out of date quite quickly, because this slide was looking at what would you have to do to demonstrate that you've commenced on site before this April coming. So very soon, obviously, part of this slide is going to be redundant because we would have hit April. I saw recently there was discussions about the staircases and some guidance that have come out, both from, I think, Michael Gove, but also from recommendations from the Fire Brigade, which people were talking or debating about whether it was clear or not clear. I think one gentleman was saying that ultimately the kind of requirements require you to kind of assess the risks. So whether the guidance says yes, you must have 2 lifts or not, evacuation lifts, for example, you've got to be happy that you've followed the risks. You've looked at the users in the building and are happy that they could evacuate at the same time as, let's say, the fire brigade coming in and trying to deal with the issue. So I think a lot of emphasis is clearly on the design team, the strategic team, and the risks reviews to either confirm that we want to use staircase or not, for example, because there does seem to be different conflicting guidance. And then this is regarding the terminology. I think this is the diagrams from the, this is the diagrams that I had extracted, some of the diagrams rather, which talked about the definition. Typically, in terms of what we do, we do sort of standalone individual buildings rather than having maybe a large podium with multiple different buildings coming off it, for example, which are some of the other diagrams in that document. But I think we can obviously add the links that Mo's sent across to this page so that people can kind of look at whether their project is covered in those diagrams or scenarios. And then finally, just looking at, again, some more things that I picked up from the webinar about the kind of process and getting, how do we get to the final completion certificates, and then looking at the competency issues and discussions around principal designer, principal contractor. There's obviously going to be an insurance issue, and how do we get to kind of demonstrate our competency. Again, I think I saw someone on LinkedIn, an architect, saying, well, look, we've already paying all of these fees and you're asking us to pay more fees to register to be a PD, for example, under the Building Safety Act. So there's, again, a little bit of pushback, I guess, from people. So I think this element of competency and insurance is still very, I guess, new to everyone. And I think that was, and yeah, this is some of the questions I was just making a note of that we've been asked, like I mentioned, from that local authority about how do they go about tackling multiple buildings which have different users, i.e. leaseholders and tenants, and how do you go about doing works to potentially kind of a patchwork quilt of works to a facade, just simply because of the fact that they don't own all the properties. They can't simply go, we're going to do all the properties in one go, or the vacancies in there. So those are kind of potential life, real life scenarios that are coming through, and it'll be interesting to hear what happens on Friday, and through the link that Mo you shared in terms of asking questions through the building register, so the building regulator. So I'll, if it's okay, I'll share that PowerPoint as well, or PDF probably is easier for people to comment on. But I think a combination of things that I've tried to extract in those crib sheets, ideally they would go into Jarek's workflow so that you know, we're not creating lots of stuff, we're just creating one concise things. If that includes obviously government links, website links, then I think, or the building safety regulator links, they're the two sources of information, I guess, that we should be referring to. So that's the aim, really, is just to make sure that between, let's say, Jarek's workflow and my crib sheets, we've kind of captured what we know to date, and it's as best advice that we can share to the wider community at the moment. And I'm sure obviously other organisations are probably doing similar crib sheets, and I'm sure there will be. So it's really about just kind of knowledge sharing and getting something out there to help.
Could I just reach out to, you know, the community or the group here? Has anybody else? I imagine that other people are doing a similar sort of exercise that Daz has been doing. If you've got something, you know, would you be willing to join in with that so that we can get everybody's inputs? I see Mike Smith's joined. I imagine that you've done quite a bit, Mike. I've picked on him.
Well, what we can do, George, is it might be useful for us to set a bit of a timeline to releasing, let's say, version 1 of
Yeah.
combination of Jarek's and things. So I don't know, maybe the end of next month is probably good a time as any, because ultimately that brings into the beginning of April, which is when the commencement deadline for registering, you know, projects that are currently live finishes, let's say. So that might be, you know, just happens to be pertinently a month away from sort of now, 1st of April, I think it is. So shall we, what I'll do is I'll share my slides and I'll probably share that to you, Jis, and then if you could share that to those in this group and the wider thing, and we can ask for maybe feedback within the next couple of weeks, you know, just on top of the PDFs, and the same for Jarek's thing, and then maybe me and Jarek could do a little workshop and bring that together, and so then maybe by the end of March we go, okay, here's what we know, you know, version 1. I think that might help in terms of just getting something out there and having a deadline for it.
Yes. Does anybody else have anything to contribute on that?
I've got nothing like what Daz has done, but once that's sent out, I'm more than happy to comment on it and come back.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Mo. No, appreciate it. Like I said,
Really,
there may be some glaring errors as well, which is always good to be shown out as well. Hi, Anna.
really, really amazing diagram on Miro board. We haven't got anything that visual, but we are starting to try and define some rules and kind of workflows for our teams, and also kind of trying to find where our responsibilities stop and start, if that makes sense. I have to say, ashamedly only working Excel so far. So I don't have anything for today, but I will try and catch up with our team who are specifically looking at BSA stuff, and then try and share maybe something next time, just to show kind of what we're thinking, what we're struggling with. Projects are very different and in very different stages as well. So yeah, yeah, okay. But thank you for sharing. Really, really, really impressive. Thanks.
No, I think Jarek's done a great job, as I say. He's clearly very good at workflow diagrams on Miro.
Really good at workflow. Amazing.
It's sort of that kind of brain. But it's interesting because you're right in terms of responsibility. I mean, if you keep the fact that we're in the sort of design group, we got to be mindful of obviously advising clients on certain things, but also what is the requirement across the board on all projects from a principal designer under the Building Safety Act, because that obviously is a competency thing, is required for all projects as it goes. So there's all projects, and then there's the high risk building projects. And at the moment, in terms of our practice, our view is that we would like to, bit like I guess when CDM came, many years ago, is to kind of be guided by those who are specialising in with the label Building Safety Act PD, because they probably should have like the insurance and the guidelines. I think, George, I think I shared with you that gentleman from Griffiths and Armour and Griffiths, who is in that PI kind of world, because it will be useful to understand that, so to understand what they're doing, so kind of learn from those who are the specialists, have got the correct insurance, etc., and then absorb it as we become more competent and able to take that role, which is the similar thing that we did for, let's say, the CDM PD role, for example. That's our general view. And as said, at the moment, we don't have projects which fall into the high risk buildings, but obviously we are working on projects full stop. So that PD role obviously extends across all projects now. So I think that will be useful, Anna. And the thing I did have is, I know obviously previously you were working on a project which you're trying to get to Gateway 2 and was doing all the right things. What happened to that? But I think something, was it the fire stopping issue and the details, they went bust, and then I mean, I think they're the kind of real life scenarios which are really useful.
Yeah. That project is gone on hold for other reasons, not necessarily the fire safety issues. So we actually got as far as nearly submitting Gateway 2, and then some rethinking had to be done. Yeah, to be continued. I'll definitely update you as soon as we know more what's going on. We're hoping it's going to go back online, but yeah, we haven't submitted it basically. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Mike, I think you said your mic's not working, but I didn't know whether I presume you wanted to say something. Okay, so you got a Miro board, the individual integrate to collaborate. Okay, I guess if you're happy to share that on this, we can then cross share Miro boards with Jarek and then maybe come together in, like I said, if I put a timeline in terms of, let's say, 2 weeks to get comments back, that gives us maybe a couple of more weeks to bring it together and polish it up, if that's okay. Perfect. Okay, thanks, Mike. What was I going to say? Sorry, I kind of lost my thought in terms of what I was saying to Anna. But I think the only other one, George, was whether, going back a number of months to the original sort of 4 questions that we had in terms of asking the wider community. I don't know whether you've had a chance to share them and got any thoughts, or do we need to just reshare that to kind of see whether the questions are relevant? I suspect they are, because they were fairly sort of high level questions. But yeah, I don't know if you've got any update on that, or do we need to just reshare that to get any updates?
Richard, are you able to contribute to that?
Yeah, we did send them out, Daz, and we got some back, which not much, but we got some response back, which we just sent through to you, I think. We've not had anything since, no. To be fair, the working group meetings have been very busy, so I can understand why that happened. We've had a lot of stuff going on over the last few months, but no, we're happy to actually obviously put that out again. I understand. I'm wondering if, we do find that we don't always get the response when we just send an email out. People don't see the email very, very often. So I'm wondering if you'd be better off doing a workshop kind of thing and getting like a couple of people from each working group and thrash it out during the meeting.
No, agreed. I guess lots of emails coming into everyone, isn't it? So if you do dedicate a thing, and we get, even if it's one person from the 6 different groups, it may be 1 or 2 bullet points that we generate per question, but at least it's sort of a holistic feedback.
Well, it's a start, and then you can do it again, can't you? It's very difficult to get anything actually finished
Yeah.
You know, I mean, nothing's ever finished, as we know, in this realm. But yeah, it would certainly give you a start, wouldn't it? And then also, once you've done that, you've got a lot of people who wanted to come to the meeting, but couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, or wanted to sign up, and they then are engaged, and you'll get responses back from them.
No, it makes sense. Well, I think that's what I'm conscious of in terms of, I guess, getting out something outputting out there. It may not, it's certainly not going to be finished because everyone's learning still. But
Sure.
if it's 90% accurate, 10% errors, that's in a way great, because then those things can be, flushed out. So, well, look, if you want to share any feedback you've had, that'd be great, Richard. And then I could either include that or exclude that from my little sort of 5-6 crib sheet thing in the PowerPoint that I just shared, and then we can share that with this team and the wider team again.
Sure.
But yeah, if anyone can come back within the next couple of weeks, and if it doesn't matter necessarily, because we'll then still issue it, and then people can then react to it and say, well, no, you got it wrong, or actually didn't realize that, or here's another link, or here's our experience. So it's that formal issue, I guess, that gets people going, I guess, in terms of responding to. So no, happy to be involved in that, Richard, in terms of that little working group to discuss the 4 questions, and maybe in a couple of weeks to go through the 2 Miro boards and maybe my crib sheet in terms of finalizing a workflow diagram with some notes.
Absolutely. Leave that with us. I'll get something. We'll get back to you on the dates and stuff.
Okay, fine.
All right. Cheers.
I've got something to just explain what we've been doing with Inactive Plan that I think that might be helpful as well. When you're ready, Daz, if that's
yeah, no,
okay.
share away. Thank you. Because there were the 3 main topics I had, which was share Jarek's thing or bring it back up to the agenda. I'll share my PowerPoint to get feedback, and then the 4 questions. So over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So what we've been doing, we've been working with Origin and John Morrow, who's on this call, I think still, but also other clients as well, to look at what information is actually auditable that needs to be provided and what's essential. And one way of doing that was to look at things through the prism of Regulation 38. So, and also Regulation 7. So these are things that we're told we need information on as far as safety critical assets. And obviously the Regulation 38 thing, what becomes significant for the client in particular, or the responsible person, is that this is the new legislation that came in August that I think a lot of clients haven't yet become familiar with. I know John has, but basically the client has got to expressly confirm that they've received the information that is sufficient for them to understand and operate and maintain the building. Now, that's such a broad scope. I think that's a legal requirement now, and it's not hugely well defined. So we've been drilling into Regulation 38 and related references to try and come up with something that's definitive. The other aspect of this is the role of the principal designer and principal contractor. And again, in the legislation, you can see there that they have to confirm, first of all, that they've provided everything that's needed. And again, what does that mean? And also that they've received notice from the responsible person acknowledging receipt of the information. So I think that's quite a strong responsibility. So what we've done is looked at what is in the Act in terms of what the basic information is, and also looking at things from a point of view of the effectively systems that you have to ensure that you've got the information on. And it's fair to say that of all the conversations that we've been having with client organizations, they never get this in a complete format. Never. Even though this isn't new. This is something that's been in place, I think, for almost 20 years. But in practice, this information is very fragmented. So one of the things that we've been doing is developing a I've lost it now. Here we are. We've been going through Regulation 38 and also BS 9999 to look at what information's needed for the different systems and the elements in the systems, and then using this as a mechanism to be able to validate whether that information has actually been provided or not. I'll just bring that down a little bit so you can see it more easily. So what we're trying to get to is a situation where that we can be definitive, and also that's from Regulation 38 and BS 9999. But here, what we've done here is picked up, what we're doing is integrating this with what's coming through from BISRIA, which is the statutory compliance checklist, largely for M&E, obviously, because that's what BISRIA is about. And we've also tried to tie it back to the clauses in the Act, so that we can identify what is essential information and what isn't. We've also started to build this as a standard register of systems, because one of the challenges is that everybody's O&Ms are structured differently. And if we can have things properly referenced, then I think we stand a much better chance. And then, if we can define uniclass codes against things, it means that we're in a better position. We can also then look at what documentation is required, and we can build this into a set of information requirements, which can then be used to test to see whether the information has actually been handed over. And I can't see any other way of a responsible person or a client saying that they've received what they need. And then this goes through the checklist of questions. So we're looking at how best to organise that. So I'm just wondering whether people are interested in this sort of. We've tried to, which is my way, tried to do this in a very sort of methodical, structured way. And if you're interested in joining us on that journey, then we're very interested in that. John.
I was just going to add to that, George. Thank you. That retrieving the information in a timely manner is like pulling teeth. And what we have found is that the templates and those checklists, those methodical checklists that we use, we put them into our contracts on our AFLs to make it a legal requirement for them to provide that information prior to PC happening. And even then, it's still very difficult, because obviously there's a lot of information to scrutinize and go through. And what the reality of it is, that we get this, we're furnished with the majority of this information literally days before practical completion. So we're just trying to force them into to gather the information, share it, and allow us time to scrutinize it.
Definitely, it needs to be progressive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mo, you had your hand up as well a moment ago.
That was a mistake if it was.
No problem. Yeah. Okay, so if is there anybody else that if you're interested in getting involved in our thinking on that, then put your name in the chat and we'll invite you. Just drop your name in the chat and we can bring you in on that. I think it's particularly relevant for people that are looking to provide the principal designer role, because I can't see how that it's a tangible way that you can demonstrate that you've that the project has actually complied, and really we shouldn't be getting to a situation which John's saying there. If the principal designer is in control of that position, we shouldn't be getting to a situation where all of that information is sort of dumped on the client at handover or almost handover, and then they've got a huge job to actually pull it all together. And it's also fair to say that construction companies themselves are exposed, because at the end of the day, most of this information is actually going to be provided by the specialist subcontractors who have installed things, and they need a mechanism to ensure that they've received what they need. And it's all so woolly, it seems to me anyway, as a layperson.
Yeah, I would agree. It's very woolly. I will jump in now, but I think the principal designer building regs, the onus on that is to comply with the functional requirements of the building regs. So the level of information that you need to demonstrate that, nobody knows. We don't know if it's a light touch, if it is just you tick a box saying yes, we agree the design, and strategies perform that functional requirement, or do you need to dig deep? Because there's certainly going to be elements where you need to provide commissioning, etc., to show that smoke control or something like that complies. But is the principal designer just then responsible for attaining that information or making the client aware that that information is needed? So it is all woolly, and I think we're only going to know as we go along and submit applications and see what comes out of the wash.
That's interesting, Mo. So I absolutely agree that's something where everybody's still navigating at the moment. Do you think it's possible that the scope of the principal designer's responsibility may be only to inform that something is needed, rather than say, has it been provided?
I think it's possibly going to be a bit of both, and it depends what it is, because there's you've got different consultants, etc. Would a PD have to be competent enough to know what a structural engineer, every bit of information a structural engineer needs to provide, or are you relying on the competence of the structural engineer to provide the right information? Do you see what I mean? But you could definitely have a minimum of drawing structural calculations, etc.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? I just don't think that that role should be providing a exhaustive list, because the BSR might actually request information that no one's thought about.
Yeah, the other question I would have is, does the principal designer's role or responsibility extend beyond handover?
No, I would say.
Okay.
That's my own opinion. I think the principal designer is there to plan, manage, and monitor. I think that's the terminology that they use during the construction phase, and at handover, I would say then that then those responsibilities go to the accountable person, because they're then in ownership of the building.
But if the information proves to be missing in a year's time, then
it can't be. That otherwise it won't handle. The BSR need to be satisfied that the amount of information that's being provided is enough for them to hand over that building.
So what you're saying is that the BSR, so probably building control, who could be a independent, the fact that they've accepted I mean, I don't think they are doing that though, Mo. I don't think that they would confirm that everything has been provided. I think they'd leave it open.
Well, that's why the statement for compliance against the building regulations is there. That's again my understanding. So it's,
I see what you mean.
You know, so if for example it turns out, I'm trying to think of an example, but just say it turned out that data sheets weren't provided for smoke detectors or something like that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example. If you're a year later, that wouldn't have affected the functional requirements and the building being deemed safe at handover under the functional requirements of the building regulations. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, but if for example, not so much the data sheets, but if there were no compartmentation drawings, or
it wouldn't be handed out. Yeah, it wouldn't be handed over. That's my understanding. Like you know, so the building control application would need to cover you know, those elements, and we're not just talking about fire and structure anymore. It's all the approved documents.
Yes.
So yeah, I think this is all in place, so we won't ever see that, you know, that scenario of someone saying we haven't got compartmentation plans. That would have been formed firstly by the fire engineer with the fire strategy, backed up by architectural design intent. Yeah, and that's possibly all you need, unless you've got a specialist subcontractor that then produces drawings to, you know, for their own purpose, to demonstrate that they're complying with, you know, with that compartmentation.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but it's how I see it.
No, it's funny because I guess if you look at what the CDM role is, it's that kind of orchestral kind of reference, isn't it, where you can't know everything, but it's a case of, I guess, making sure that you've asked the right competent people to be involved in the project in the first place, and then you're ensuring where your checklists and stuff come into their own, George, is the ability to kind of systematically, because I don't know, ultimately the PD sort of become the building control that, you know, normally you would go to, let's say, a building control inspector or an approved inspector and say, here is the information, can you have a look at it, let us know if you're missing something. They've obviously flipped that around completely and saying you've got to prove that you've met all the things. So I'm thinking aloud here, the sort of the PD has sort of become essentially a building control, okay, well, you provide me this information, here's our checklist to make sure that we as a team have kind of dealt with all these different parts of it, which then, I guess, if you've got that checklist in a similar way, the CDM PD, you know, there are various templates to make sure you go through all the potential hazards or significant hazards you could have on a site. You know, so you kind of work your way through, make sure you haven't missed anything. In the same way, I guess the PD and the team would have to go through a similar checklist, including like your one, and then satisfy themselves. And then the responsible person goes, yeah, okay, look, I appreciate you've gone through all these, you think you've done everything. And it's that chain, isn't it, where you're relying on the structures, the M&E to be competent and have, you know, done all the finite calculation reviews and stuff, which the PD cannot ever possibly have all the expertise on. So as long as the chain is strong and the competency chain is strong, you go through your checklist and say, well, yeah, all the building reg things are met. Here's the evidence, over to you. The responsible person can then go, yep, I'm happy, I've seen that. And then then everyone goes forward, I guess. So I don't know, in my mind, thinking aloud, the PD sort of acting as what would have been, let's say, an approved inspector, but working obviously with the team and checklist like you do in CDM to make sure that all the bases are covered. Obviously, there could be weak links, but that's that's going to be everywhere, isn't it? Unfortunately.
No, I agree. I think one of the other things that we could maybe, as a community, help with is actually defining some of those scenarios that you were suggesting. Because if we could do that, then at least people have got it. It won't be extensive, but it's a way that people can say this. Does that make sense?
Yep. I think that people who are directly involved in the projects, I guess similar to the CDM advice anyway, are best placed because they understand the changes and dynamics of the project firsthand. But it's a whole another level of sort of, as I said, there's the insurance world that we've got to get our heads around, but also then actually what is it that the role is? Because I think from the recording that I watched, George, of the you shared with me, which was the advisory group one, the lady who talked about what's in the PAS and what's in the kind of guidance for a competent people is not that clear either. So there's clearly grey areas that we're all kind of trying to figure out. Sorry, Ben, I presume you wanted to jump in there.
No, yeah, just to really amplify your point there, the way we're in the kind of privileged position where we are the freeholder, the developer, the construction manager, and the responsible person. So where we've been operating this sort of handover process for about 18 months now, trying to do the sort of gateway 3 process, as we go. And so I represent the client and I'm the sort of gatekeeper of the information. And the way we found this sort of handover process to work most effectively is we do reviews sort of for the last sort of 6 months before handover. We do it sort of monthly. And we basically say, I say to the construction manager, look, unless you tell me something's ready, I'm not looking at it. But I'm happy to look at things that are incomplete, but you have to tell me what's incomplete. And I get them to fill out a tracker, which we have that basically follows the principles of the golden thread and regulation 38, and we have sort of agreed structure that the responsible person has agreed with the construction manager so that they can find the information afterwards. And we populate everything and hyperlink it all through. And we go through that monthly to just check off. There's loads of things 6 months before the completion of the building. You can get at least 50% of it checked off and banked. And so the day before handover, like Mo said, you're not getting this grand slam of having to check everything. You're just checking the sort of last 5%.
Yeah.
That seems to work quite well.
I absolutely agree. I'd be very interested in sort of comparing notes on that with you, Ben, because I think that's exactly what we need to do. Because all too often everybody leaves it until the end.
And I guess there's also the post that the registration process, which it'll be interesting to see how long. I mean, I think they're talking about 3 weeks, weren't they, to register.
We have had some issues
building.
with that, to be perfectly honest. So we've been obviously since first of October. Prior to 1st of October, we registered all the occupied buildings and did all the KBI and whatnot, and that was a body of work, but nevertheless it's done. But now you've got someone just offered me one as we were talking, just sent one through for me to look at, funnily enough. That we need to go and register. So they're saying, right, this building's just about ready to hand over. So we've got to then simultaneously check all the information, register the building, upload the KBI. And we've had a few where we've gone to register the building and the BSR has asked, is the building occupied? And we said, well, no, obviously, because we haven't registered it yet. And they've rejected our application on that basis. And so we have to say, we have to caveat, we put in the comments and say people are ready to move in. And then it tends to go through, but particularly for, you know, social housing, for example, where you've got people ready to move in the next day. And then if the BSR takes 3 weeks to get back to you approving your registration, it's a bit of a problem. So that process is still a bit sticky at the moment.
John, sorry, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it was just in regards to that process. It's especially difficult collating the regulation 38 items on section 106 schemes where we've come to the table quite late in the construction phase. But we utilize we just call it regulation 38 tracking document to record, you know, the gathering of information and the review and the closeout, get as much done as we can when we get it. And that's the only way we found that we can sort of audit that review process to make sure that everything is in order at PC. But it is, it's like pulling teeth. It is now, even to the point that we put together a discussion document as to what regulation 38 is and where it came from. Because the number of developers, contractors we work with think it's an origin task, an origin requirement, as opposed to a conversation about compliance. Even now, we still have that conversation. And there's a certain reluctance for them to provide that information in a timely manner, which just breaks my heart, to be fair.
Yeah, we found, you know, you have to be a little bit thick-headed with all of that. But now that we've got it into a rhythm, we use a tracking document as well. And we've got a site as we use that as the database that sits behind it, and then everything that is backed into it with hyperlinks, with dynamic links.
Could I ask a question in terms of where you've registered existing buildings? Is what you're having to produce to register that? Is it correct to assume that that is essentially the same as what we would have to submit for a project that's completing, or is it very different?
It's basically the same.
Mm-hmm. And am I correct in thinking that, again, the building safety regulator hasn't issued, you know, this is the checklist of things submitted, you've got to be happy yourself, etc. And that's why things like the regulation 38 is a good place to start from or work to. It would be useful if it's possible to share, I guess, like the headings of whatever you've submitted. I think there are, I'm not fully versed on it, but I think there are guidance as to what I guess a safety case needs to contain and all that kind of stuff.
But we've got a draft template that we use for the gathering of that information. I mean, in our experience, it's at a level greater than the core components that we currently cover within the regulation 38 exercise. And I'd be happy to share that with everybody.
Yeah, just because for me, I'm just sort of a visual person. If I can see a set of folders and says this is what it needs to be, personally for me, it's easy to kind of to visualize it.
That's
rather
the way
than
I
read
work
it.
too. It does. It's a lot easier, especially you know, where we're working across teams within the organisation itself. And one thing that's become apparent is some of the terminology, even between the teams. So it helps. It gives us clarity.
I think an easy,
a glossary of terms.
There's an easy way to cut through that, because, you know, like three of us there have just said that we do basically the same thing, you know, and we've come up with different, you know, independently come up with the same solution, which is, you know, clearly a standard format tracker which backs into, you know, regulation 38 and in the fullness of time the golden thread. But then the government portal is so poorly designed that you have to retype all this information. And, you know, I was having a moment at the BSR just for Christmas there and said, you know, we all have this in the same format. If you just gave us a like your template and we'll all just use it. It's fine, and then we can just give it to you. But making people retype everything is just an irresponsible waste of people's time.
What is that? Is that to upload information to register? Could you give me an example of what this
So the
portal? I've never.
The KBI information, for example, we have all that, and we've
yeah.
got in various trackers and you know, lots of other people on this call would have it in their own trackers. It's probably not too dissimilar.
Sorry, when you refer to KBI, what is that?
The key building information.
Okay, fine.
That you have to submit. So I counted up the other day. Over the last few weeks, we've filled out 17,500 text boxes on the BSR portals with this same information. And you know, the gateway process is kind of similar. Like making people retype information is just doesn't help anyone. And it introduces mistakes, and some of the terminology on the KBI website is a bit poor. And you know, if there was just a template that they gave to people, just make everyone's life so much easier.
Yeah, in essence, Ben, to some extent, that's what we're trying to do. I mean, the fact is that the regulator, I think generally, the government generally, they don't want to explicitly tell you what to do because they don't want to take on that responsibility.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do, I mean, we've just in terms of the checklist that you're talking about, the Regulation 38 checklist, we've pulled together, I think, 10 or so. I've seen John's checklist, and it's excellent. And yet, you know, other local authorities or housing associations, they've got a similar thing, but very different. Yeah. Either not as detailed or whatever. And I think that's that needs to be rationalized in some sort of way, because we need to be able to tell the construction supply chain what good looks like, don't we? And I absolutely agree with you. So, you know, maybe we pick up on that.
I mean,
you know,
it would be great to get that consistency, because I must admit, when we pulled, it was our motivation was purely selfish, to gather the information so we had peace of mind, and certainly to ease the dialogue we had with other teams post handover. But I've had numerous crises of confidence in the respect that, are we overdoing it? But then and then I'm just, you know, when you sit back and you review it again, I'm thinking, I don't think we are. I really don't think we are. So it's a tough one, but as you say, a consistency across the board would be, well, that would be, and communicating that to, you know, all the relevant parties. That would be
well, it's
something.
also the method of doing these things. I mean, I was talking with another big developer recently, and he was saying that the process that he's implemented, and you know, he's been doing this for many years, it is a requirement. He said the problem is in getting fire doors tested, for example. So the fire door installation information, it then needs to be inspected 6 months later, apparently. So what he's doing, he's requiring, rather than it being inspected 6 months after it's been handed over, what he's built into their method is that it ought to be inspected at the same time as it's installed.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do, and that's a key element, that we have a review, and a review during the construction phase, during the installation phase, and then all the checks and balances to follow. Because we've had a number of schemes where part of the pre-occupation FRA process, we review the fire doors, and we found numerous faults and, you know, serious issues with installs. And we make that's a mandatory practice now on all our schemes, section 106 or land led, doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
So he's been sort of castigated by his development team, saying you're making it so that our cost is we're asking for things that are more expensive than other developers are.
Yeah.
But his argument, I think quite rightly, is that but we've got to do it anyway. Why wait 6 months and then it's a big problem.
It's more problematical. It is more problematical to deal with it at that point than it is to catch it as it's happening. I mean, the hard conversations I've had, I'm fortunate my group director and director is fully supportive of the approach that we take. But what I have found was, if I may speak candidly to everybody, is some project managers even, they just see it as an encumbrance to the delivery of the scheme, and that it's me being, what's the word, anal about the whole process and wanting to capture everything. And I just, the conversations I've had with this, I said, fine, if we move forward without these checks and balances, I said, you do realise the responsibility for this and fallout for this will land at your feet.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, okay, they'll acquiesce and work with us. But it is a constant fight to get that. But the fire door issues, we put that in as we have dedicated fire surveyors, and they pick that up during the construction phase, in addition to clerk of works.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Good.
I'm sorry, Mo,
Okay.
you had your hand up. Sorry, I know you just put it down, but I don't know if
No
that
worries.
was...
It was just I need to jump ship now, but I've just sent a link. It's which is related to this discussion that sets out the documents that you need to prepare at various stages. So as a minimum, the headings in here is sort of what you would be looking at submitting for building control certification stage. So that link is quite handy, and it also describes what some of the information needs to contain. So, for example, like a site plan, what scale it needs to be, etc. But yeah, I was just typing that in the chat, but I don't need to now. So yeah,
No, thank you.
I do need to jump. So thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mo. That's really helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that. I think we just got a couple of more minutes, so I don't know if anyone else who hasn't spoken wants to ask anything or say anything, just share an experience, good or bad, I guess. Anyone else who is on the call would be great, or if not, we can have a slightly early lunch. Well, shall we wrap it up there then, everyone? Well, as I said, I'll share the a PDF copy of the slides that I did. What I'll do is, if I share that and some of these links, Jis and Richard, to yourself and George, and then I know you've got the wider mailing list, and that can go. So I'll try and format it in a sensible sort of bit of wording, and then that hopefully can then be shared to the whole groups rather than necessarily just the people in this meeting.
Absolutely, and we'll get that meeting sorted out.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
Definitely.
Brilliant. Well, look, thanks everyone for their time. Thank you and input. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the week.
Great
Thank
stuff.
you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Really good.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.